On 5th September 1920, there was a message issued to all the Indians. It was a message of non-cooperation against the British rule. If you were following their laws, you were told to break every single one of them. If you were attending their schools, you were told to not attend anymore. And all the point of contacts with the British Army were told to be abolished. All on command of one man, and his name Mahatma Gandhi. And today, we are going to be looking at why Mahatma Gandhi brought the most significant changes, and while being non-violent, he was the one that shifted the control of the Indian subcontinent towards the Indian people from the hands of the Britishers. In January 1888, he enrolled at Samaldas College in Bhavnagar State, the sole degree-granting institution of higher education in the region. After 2 uncertain years, where he was not able to start a successful law practice, Mahatma Gandhi in 1893 went to South Africa to represent an Indian merchant in a lawsuit, where he continued to live for the next 21 years. But something changed. A man by the name of Gopal Krishna Gokhale had several requests sent to Mahatma Gandhi to persuade him to come back, to which he agreed. On January 9, 1915, Mahatma Gandhi came back to his motherland to help his people, and it was a clear indication that something great is about to happen.
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace. I know the value of discipline and truth.
And from then, it was a series of events aimed at breaking the Britishers, taking their morale down, and having them realize that it is not their place but of the Indians. Starting off, it was the Champaran movement in 1917. Leading that, it was the Kheda movement in 1918. After that, in 1920, the year had 2 major movements, the Khilafat movement and the non-cooperation. After that, for a decade, it was a silent zone. Not Mahatma Gandhi, but all of his disciples were active. In 1930, it was civil disobedience movement. And finally, in 1942, the Quit India movement. All of these movements led to one thing. The Britishers had to realize that the Indians wanted the control of their land back in their hands, and they were not going to back down from any challenge. Now, let's look at the 3 most important movements: the non-cooperation movement, the civil disobedience, and the Quit India movement, and how Gandhi was a key factor in the success of all of these movements. As I've already mentioned, in 1920, the non-cooperation movement launched by Mahatma Gandhi was one of the most pivotal points that led to a huge change in the Indian history. Gandhi wanted every single one of his people, every Indian, to not do any activity that sustained the British economy and the British Empire in India. He wanted all the people to stop going to any buildings, any governmental buildings that were made by the Britishers. He wanted all the Indians to stop following all the rules made by them, following all the laws made by them, and always do what they feel like were good for them to gain the independence. He wanted people to feel a feeling of what he called Swaraj, meaning self-independence, self-governance. He wanted people to stop all of their contact with the Britishers. Even if they were working under them, people were told to leave their jobs. People were told to get together to show that no matter what the Britishers do, Indian people will not back down. But this came to a tragic end. The movement was eventually called off by Gandhi in February 1922, following the Chauri Chaura incident. After police opened fire on a crowd of protesters, killing and injuring several, the protesters followed the police back to their police station and then burnt the station down, killing the shooters and several other police inside. Nonetheless, the movement marked the transition of Indian nationalism from a middle-class basis towards the masses. After all these horrific events following the non-cooperation movement, Gandhi's commitment to non-violence was redeemed when, between 1930 and 1934, tens of millions again revolted in the Salt Satyagraha, which made India's cause famous worldwide for its unerring adherence to non-violence. But before we move any further, we need to go some years back. In 1930, the civil disobedience movement was a non-violent movement which began in 1930 and was led again by Mahatma Gandhi.
The long-awaited hour arrived, and he was there. The Great March for Liberty began. Gandhi started on his 241-mile-long trek from the ashram to Dandi, a village on the sea coast, along with his chosen band of 78 ashram inmates, symbols of the national determination with a strong resolve and undaunted look. As the epic march began, multitudes thundered out their welcome to the revolution and expressed their will to do and die through the cries of Inqilab Zindabad. 61-year-old Gandhi, with his undying faith in the justice of the cause he was pursuing and in the success of the great campaign he had embarked upon, marched at the head of the procession with quick and unfaltering steps. The pilgrim marches onward on his long trek through the seas of humanity to the appointed place where India is first coming to grips with the great British Empire, observed Jawaharlal Nehru. Staff in hand, he goes along the dusty roads of Gujarat, clear-eyed and firm of step, with his faithful band trudging along behind him. Many a journey he has undertaken in the past, many a weary road traversed, but longer than any that have gone before is this last journey of his, and many are the obstacles in his way. But the fire of great resolve is in him, and surpassing love of his countrymen. None that passes him can escape the spell, and men of common clay feel the spark of life. It is a long journey, for the goal is the independence of India and the ending of the exploitation of her millions.
Movement began to express mass dissent against the British colonial rule and their oppressive regime. It started with the Dandi March, where salt made by the people to break the unfair salt law, which gave complete control over salt production to the British government. This movement then spread across the whole country, where large masses of people participated to disobey unfair laws and not cooperate with the government rule. There were forest laws which were not followed by the tribal people. There were rural laws which were not followed by the villagers, and there were civil laws which were not followed by all the people living in the cities and the people who were given the opportunities to work under the British force. This brought the British administration to a halt and even led to a loss of revenue for them. This was unprecedented, as British could not, despite the lathi charges and firing on innocent people, stop the movement. Eventually, the British agreed to a roundtable conference to discuss constitutional reforms to satisfy the demands of the Indian people. In this roundtable conference, 74 delegates from India attended the conference. However, the Indian National Congress, along with the Indian business leaders, kept away from the conference. Many of them, including Mahatma Gandhi, were in jail for their participation in the civil disobedience movement, and their boycott doomed this conference to be an utter failure.
That responsibility for the government of India should be placed upon legislatures, central and provincial, with such provisions as may be necessary to guarantee during a period of transition the observance of certain obligations and to meet other special circumstances, and also with such guarantees as are required by minorities to protect their political liberties and rights.
After all of these struggles, it was time now to deal a serious blow on the British powers. The Quit India movement, launched by Mahatma Gandhi on August 8, 1942, was a significant capri in India's struggle against the Britishers. Also known as the August Revolution, it called for an immediate end to the British colonialism in India. Mahatma Gandhi had a slogan, "Do or die." It was the rallying cry urging Indians to act with non-violence and with a powerful resistance. This movement gained widespread support throughout the country, with mass protests, strikes, and civil disobedience against the British government. But the British government had a response. They responded with arrests, imprisoning thousands of leaders, including Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, also with other leaders such as Sardar Patel. All of this led to violent clashes in some regions. However, the movement was still primarily focused on non-violent resistance. Despite facing heavy repression, the Quit India movement intensified the Indian nationalist sentiment and aided in weakening the British resolve. This movement marked a turning point in India's history because it united people from all sects together, people fighting for one cause, and that was the independence. They wanted the control of their land back with them. They wanted the Britishers to go away and all their atrocities to come to an end, which it did, and India finally gained its independence in the year 1947. All of these movements, led by Mahatma Gandhi, made the situation so volatile that even anything could be termed as the final piece of the puzzle. And something did happen. The final nail for the coffin of the Britishers was in the form of the 1946's Royal Indian Navy mutiny. It showed the Britishers that they were losing control of the local armed forces that were required to safeguard their presence in India, and hence their position was no longer tenable, and showed them that the Indian people have now finally realized that the Indian land is theirs, and what they have lost is something which they are regaining. And this marks the end of what Gandhi did in his own country, what revolution he brought with himself, what changes he made, and how he got the Britishers to leave his country and make his people independent